I'm Martyn Allen. I'm Technical Advisor, former Technical Director at Electrical Safety First. Been with the organisation 19 and a half years. Prior to that, I started life in the coal industry, actually, literally working at the coal face. Very interesting and challenging environment, but very safety aware. From there, I moved into the world of insurance risk. Again, further cutting my teeth into the world of safety, making sure plant and equipment was safe for the intended use. And after doing 17 years there, I moved to join Electrical Safety Council, as it was then, now obviously known as Electrical Safety First. And say 19 and a half years later, just looking forward to retirement now. What brought me to Electrical Safety First was really, again, just building on my safety credentials, say from being in the coal industry into the world of insurance, and just sort of wanting to build on that and to make a difference. And just it seemed a natural step to move into a charity that was trying to do good. In those times, it was all about installation safety. So I joined as a technical author, really, as senior engineer. So it was about writing loads of publications for industry. But it was making a difference to get that common view on certain safety issues within the wonderful world of electrical safety, installation-wise. But after, time was moving on, it became sensible to not just focus on the installation side. It was to look at, what was being plugged in, what were consumers using. We've all got appliances, and when we looked at the fire data, then that supported that view. Most fires were caused through faulty products and appliances, either the products themselves or the way they were being used. So it seemed logical to start focusing our efforts on product safety. And we continued that direction to where we are now, being experts in that field. Challenges, there's been a number, actually, and it's often to try and get your view across to affect change. I think what stood true then still stands true to this day. If you've got data to support your argument, your cause, then you're much more likely to get people on side to, bring that change. Again, we can't physically force change. You've got to have others who are in charge of doing that, whether it's working with industry to try and get best practice across the industry, whether it's trying to influence government to make change. It's always others. So our best approach is to gather the evidence, then work with those people to affect change. But if you haven't got the evidence, you're not going to win the argument. A specific time, an example I would give on the challenges would be consumer units, fuse boxes. In old money discussion, it was an interesting one. Say we had a lot of data. There were too many fires that were occurring, and it was not because the fuse box was at fault. It was the fact that it was often down to poor workmanship, but some of it was down to components within the consumer units as well. Were causing fires, but the fire quickly spread outside of the enclosure to set fire to all the adjacent materials in the home, because often fuse boxes were located under the stairs, so it was impeding the escape route from the property, and we thought something needed to be done about that. So again, working with the consumer unit manufacturers, who were not happy at the time. It's fair to say, there's a lot of pushback, but again, using solid data to show how many fires were occurring, we sorted out an agreed test program, and we put forward a proposal. And that initial proposal was about a different type of plastic, but further testing was carried out both by government and some of the manufacturers in that space as well. And it was quite obvious that non-combustible material, metal, was going to be better than any type of plastic in that space. So that's the direction of travel that we took. It took a while to shape the regulations around that, but it was a positive step, and we got the whole industry united in that space. And it's better for all houses in the UK. Any new consumer unit, which was about 400 to 500,000 a year, would now be made out of metal. So over a decade or two, every home would have a metal consumer unit, which is fantastic. But we got a lot of challenge and resistance from the manufacturers, in particular from installers. But again, by continuing with the data argument, we won everybody over, and we got a change in the wiring regulations, and now you can't really buy a plastic one. Every new consumer unit fuse box is made out of metal. Yeah, RCDs, residual current devices, fantastic safety feature. It's proven life-saving device. And when I first joined the charity 20 years ago, There was a few knocking about, but they were certainly not commonplace in fuse boxes, consumer units. You could get plug-in RCDs, you could get them built in the socket outlet, but there was not as many in consumer units as we would like to have seen. So again, the charity set out to launch a large campaign to try and increase use of RCDs. And, it was fantastic. And over time, that's moved to changes in the wiring regulations, British Standard 7671, where pretty much every circuit in the home now has to be RCD protected. RCDs themselves, however, continue to evolve. And, what one size fit all 20 years ago, but now with new modern equipment, electronics, then that type of equipment sometimes produces a different sort of change in the electricity waveforms. You get DC leakage, as they would call it, and that can stop an RCD operating the way it was intended. So RCDs change, but then it's not addressing legacy RCDs. So there's still work to do in that. And I think there is a disconnect between the appliance and equipment manufacturers and the RCD manufacturers. They're not talking to each other the way they should to make sure that the appliance doesn't affect the operation of an RCD. That work is ongoing, and hopefully common sense will prevail and we'll get to a better situation. But yeah, RCD's an absolute game changer in terms of life safety in the home. Key moments, there's so many really, and certainly I'm sort of proud of. And other than consuming, another one was about cables in escape routes and securing. There was loads of firefighters were getting entangled in the cables when they got warm and they were falling down. In the event of a fire, getting entangled, someone lost their lives. So we worked with the fire service to do that sensitive issue to get a change. That was a notable moment. But the other one, and it's still continuing to this day, but we're finally getting there, was about pushing for changes in the rented sector, trying to get regular electrical safety checks in the private rented sector then, but moving that out across the 4 nations. And that was a big moment in time. It took a number of years, but we sort of finally get there. It's quite humbling to see that we've even got the social rented sector in England just as I'm sort of coming to the end of my career, which is quite nice. Notable successes, I think, would have to be just the move into product safety. Organisationally, say it was all about installations when I first started, but we quickly realised that we need to focus on the products that are used in the home. And I think, leading that product safety space at the charity is something I'm immensely proud of. We built it from nothing to being quite an expert voice in that space. Even propped up by the product safety conferences, we're fast approaching of November conference. I think it's the 17th, 18th conference. And we were not a voice in that space, but now it's the calendar event for product safety. It's a fantastic event where we get the manufacturers, the retailers, the test houses, the lawyers, trading standards, fire service and government all in the same space to talk about topical product safety issues. It's a platform for others to talk about challenges and what needs to be done to sort those challenges out. And we are facilitators of that conversation. It's one of the things I'm immensely proud of, that the charity is really focusing heavily on product safety, which are in everybody's homes. It still is sadly the main cause of electrical fires. So there's still lots of work to be done in terms of not just standards and legislation, but about awareness and education of consumers. If we all used the products the way they were intended to be used, they'd be much more safe to do. So there's still work to do in that space. That will continue to be something we need to do organisationally. Yeah, I'm immensely proud of the work we've done on product safety. Yeah, before we bought everything online like we do, yeah, the issue there was about second-hand products. Second-hand products were sold in second-hand stores or car boot stores that still are about actually. That was the focus of our issue to do with substandard products, broadly speaking. There were some bricks and mortar shops that were selling sort of, less than great quality or even fake products, but they were easy to reach. We could work with trading standards, to, get the evidence. They could go and have a conversation and take extreme action if they wish to do so from an enforcement side of things. As soon as online marketplaces became a thing, that became increasingly difficult because many of the people selling products on those platforms were not based in the UK. So trading standards have got no jurisdiction overseas. And it was almost impossible to sort of get access to take the products down. The platforms themselves were not part of any legislative regime. sort of getting there, but they were certainly not at the time. So there was no way Trading Standards could have a conversation with Amazon and eBay, who was, you know, the biggest players at the time and still arguably are. But yeah, it was a massive change of approach that we had to take organisationally, because, you know, almost everything we started to see that was substandard, unsafe, or even counterfeit, or being recalled items still being sold, was available on an online marketplace in abundance. So there was a lot of work to do, still is a lot of work to do to get them where they need to be, so that, you know, shopping online is exactly the same experience as shopping on the high street. The third-party sellers are often based overseas, so you can't get access to them. It's difficult to educate them. But the fact is, with online marketplaces, the reason why it's so important that we have to get legislation around the online marketplace space is that somebody overseas cannot sell to a consumer in the UK without the bridge. And the bridge is the online marketplace or the e-commerce platform, whatever it is. If that platform didn't exist, the third-party market would not be possible from an overseas. It would just be not an issue at all, which is why it wasn't before they became a thing. So because they provide that platform, they have to be part of the supply chain actors in terms of legislation, and they have to be accountable for the products that they sell. So there's progress being made, but there's still the detail that needs to be nailed out on what the level of accountability is. But, you know, the fact is that almost all non-compliant products that we see as available online, recalled products, continue to be sold online. You know, we've been doing a lot of work on the e-micromobility space, you know, e-bike batteries, conversion kits. Again, almost all of the substandard batteries that are causing terrible fires, loss of life, are available on online marketplaces. And it's not just the Amazon and eBays that we've known for many years. They've done some great work in this space, you know, but it's so much bigger than that. There seems like a new platform stepping up all the time, whether it's Temu, TikTok Shop, you know, a whole raft of online marketplaces. So again, it's essential that legislation that comes out captures all e-commerce and not just focusing on the big guys. What I'd like to see is that Amazon and eBay, the leaders in that space, actually take a lead to shape their own legislation. So because we all shop online, we're not saying that online is evil. You can see a time when bricks and mortar outlets won't exist at all. Everything will be available online. So I think the ideal opportunity is now for the leaders of the online sector to step up. So they're doing some work, but they need to step up and shape the legislation, and so there's more confidence in the online marketplace. And they'll, you know, bear the fruits of that as well, because if it's a trusted online marketplace space, then you will go to them. I think the online marketplace space, as in all technology, the speed of change is, nobody could have foreseen it at all. If I could, I'd have had shares in Amazon or eBay. It's just the way technology is progressing, it's almost impossible to keep up with it. So one just followed the other. And as soon as they started to grow and they had enormous amounts of money, then they were able to build their space. I think their shop window is so many billion listings. You can't comprehend how many products are available on their platforms. But with that comes great responsibility. I think, you know, I compare it to this big snowball rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and all the compliance people are trying to poke it with a stick to keep it in the right direction. It was always going to be a losing battle, and that's why they need to put more resources into making sure that their platforms are as safe as they can be. But no, I think, you know, that rate of change was never foreseen by anybody. And the speed of technology now, you know, you've got opportunities to help shape the safety of those platforms as well. That you've got artificial intelligence can be a massive help to help shape the safety, from an education of their third-party suppliers, from spotting dodgy listings, you know, whether it's image recognition, whether it's just text data referencing to standards, looking at certification of products. They can use AI to weed out some of the unsafe products in the first place. Stop them being listed would be the ideal. You know, if they try to have a human element to police a massive shop window, it's impossible. So now they can use technology to actually help. So as well as the growth in the platform itself, you can use that technology to help secure the safety of those platforms. And that, I'm sure, will develop over time. It's about how quickly we get there, you know. My key takeaway from, as I leave the organisation, is it's several things really about, the organisation spends a lot of its time lobbying to shape new legislation or improve legislation as well as standards. In terms of legislation, there's no point having legislation if you haven't got robust enforcement behind it. In addition to robust enforcement, you need large education and awareness campaigns. Use that specifically as an example, using the lithium-ion batteries for e-bikes, for example. We've been pushing for third-party certification. Still seems like a sensible thing to do. It's the right thing to do. We know there's proven evidence that shows it makes a positive difference. But if there was a different approach to take, you can't have that alternative approach using general rules without confidence in enforcement and with a huge awareness and education campaign behind it. In terms of the future, I think there's challenges around older products to support the circular economy. So there's a question around how old is too old, as we keep things in the market for as long as possible. So there's a question around that in terms of reuse, repair, the competence of people carrying out repairs. That's one. But last but not least, whenever you've got all the legislation, all the standards in place, all the competence of the repairers, there'll still be a residual element for education and awareness. And I think this organisation, ESF, has got a massive part to play in continuing to make sure that we communicate with the public so that they can keep themselves and their families safe. That in itself is a guaranteed need for the organisation. The challenge that goes with that is how you shape your communications. I'll use my own daughter as an example. She doesn't watch mainstream TV or listen to mainstream radio, so there's no point putting loads of safety messages on there. She gets a news and other information from social media channels and outlets. So we need to make sure that we're using the right channels to reach the right people. And we also need to make sure that we don't overwhelm people or underwhelm people. So the style of message, the shape of message, one size definitely doesn't fit all. So we need to think about how we communicate with the people. We want to communicate with people, not just about the numbers. It's about, are we making a difference? And if we don't see that through behavioural change, then we're not doing what we need to be doing. In terms of the industry, when I first joined, it was very regimented, very complex, but extremely professional. And whilst there may have been robust challenge in the committee rooms and the meetings, there was respect, and there was a desire to reach a similar outcome. We might not agree on the route to it, but there was agreement, and we spent as much time as we need to get to that outcome that everybody was happy with. So consensus was the way forward, and it seemed to work. The consumer unit example that I mentioned before was a classic example of that. I think now I've seen a bit of an eroding away of professionalism, and I don't think it's helpful. Nothing's so easy, otherwise it would have been solved years ago. So things are complex, but we need to work together to have a common message, common solution. There's no point having fragmented solutions because it really doesn't help. If you've got inconsistency, it's pointless. I think one of the strong traits of this organisation and values is about facilitating difficult conversations. I think it's a strong strength. The Wiring Regulations Advisory Group, the RAG, is classic. Our tech team does host those meetings. It's not easy. We probably don't publish loads and loads of questions because it's difficult to get that consensus view around the table. But it's essential that we do talk to get that common view. If you haven't got a common view, you've just got chaos. So that's my message to industries: continue to work together. Collaboration is fantastic when it works well. We just don't do enough of it. As a closing shot, as I hang my screwdrivers up for the last 19 and a half years that the charity, it's been fantastic, working with organisations like the fire service, training standards, but also the manufacturers, the retailers, the test houses, and government officials in particular. It's all about people. If you've got relationships with good people who want the same thing, you can do some fantastic things. And we have done some fantastic things. And all the things I'm quite proud of doing, I couldn't have done any of them without working with great people, both within the charity and externally as well. It's been a blast.